with our Ministry of Health. We are, in essence, a conduit, if you will, between residents' councils in long-term care homes across Ontario and the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. Our mandate is quite broad, in fact. In essence, with regards to residents' councils, we are responsible for providing assistance and support in the formation, sustainability, and effectiveness of residents' councils. We are governed by a board of directors. Our board of directors, I'll just switch to the next slide here. There we go. This is a photo of our current board of directors. Each director on our board is a resident who lives in long-term care. So we have capacity for 10 directors on our board. And so I'll just put this little bug in your ear now through this webinar. If you are in a long-term care home and you are a resident of a member home with OARC and you would like to entertain the idea of perhaps working on a provincial level, contributing your opinions and working with OARC as a director on our board, please give us a call or send us off an email, and we can begin that process of seeing if there's a good fit. Our board of directors is a working board. They are diverse in age. We have had directors as young as 46, right up to mid-90s. So age is, our board, ultimately what we try to do is have a board that emulates the long-term care community itself. So the heart of our time together today is really to look into the tools that OARC has created to help with the effectiveness of residents' councils. But before we get into that, let's just talk very briefly about how to define the meaningfulness of a residents' council. What's the purpose? Why are they important? I'd like to suggest that residents' councils have certainly been around for a very long time. Some residents' councils we've met have been in existence for well over 40 years, and others we've met have just recently begun their journey with residents' councils. Now, of course, since the acclamation of the Long-Term Care Homes Act, every long-term care home in Ontario must have a residents' council. But a residents' council must be meaningful, positive, and relevant. It's not a program that's plugged into the calendar of activities every month. It's not supported exclusively by the activation or therapeutic recreation department alone. And it is not merely a complaining session. A residents' council is meaningful, as defined by bringing the requirements of the Long-Term Care Homes Act to life, in conjunction with the experience of residents living in long-term care homes each and every day. So fundamentals in understanding and supporting residents' councils. I'd like to suggest to you that it's really important to understand that residents' council, the business, the being of residents' council is so much more than the 1-hour meeting each month. Really, residents' council is designed to capture and express the collective voice of all residents living in the long-term care home. However, not all residents attend meetings. Not all residents are able to attend meetings or able to contribute in the traditional sense of everybody coming together for a residents' council meeting. So it's very, very important that residents' councils in long-term care homes are equipped and feel confident in reaching out and somehow being able to capture the voice of people who choose to or who cannot participate in that 1-hour meeting each month. So it's really about the collective voice, the efforts in your home to capture that collective voice of all residents. It certainly does include that 1-hour meeting a month, but it includes much more than that. Every single resident in a long-term care home is a member of the residents' council, whether or not they attend meetings. I'll just pause there for a moment. Every single person who lives in a long-term care home is a member of the Residence Council. The Long-Term Care Homes Act outlines the required framework, if you will, for a Residence Council, including how the communication pattern looks between the management of the home and the council. And the law also clearly articulates what we call the scope of influence that the council has within the home. What's also very important is the understanding that Residence Council belongs to the resident body, not the long-term care home itself. Therefore, the experience, the wishes, the direction for the council as set by residents themselves is very important. This slide here shows some words that refer to the legislation. The first square there talks about how the minimum standard in our law sets accountability and process. So a residence council, as defined in our legislation, is to be advisory, it's deliberate, it has terms of reference, and is provincially mandated. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, every single long-term care home in Ontario is required by law to have a functioning residence council. Formally constituted to capture the collective voice. And the 3 R's there refer to the rights, the roles, and the responsibilities that residence councils have within the long-term care home. And that is all clearly articulated in our legislation. The next square to the right of that is from a resident's perspective. So a residence council is important because it's an opportunity to generate meaningful engagement, resident to resident, creating positive mutual support. Again, a protected meeting time and opportunity for residents to speak about whatever you want to resident. And it's important to understand that within the residence council context, exercising choice and feeling that you are part of the team, knowing that you are part of the team, that the decisions and the opinions that are expressed through the residence council are a valued part of the operations of your home. So those 2 aspects coming together is what is, what is important in terms of defining what an effective residence council should be in your home. There's language in the Long-Term Care Homes Act, and it's very specific. All of the language that is in our act that talks about the licensee or the administrator of your home, they are to work in collaboration with the council. These words on this slide are pulled directly out of our legislation. So the long-term care homes direction is to work in collaboration with the council, consult with the council, look for opportunities for input. All of the results from various committees and studies and programs in your home are to be communicated with the residence council. And the last point is really important too, because the law actually says that your home is to seek out the advice of residence council. So it's a very proactive way of communicating. The law also speaks directly to residence council and provides direction there too. So residence councils are to advise the long-term care home. Residence councils are to provide recommendations to the long-term care home. And residence councils are to review documents. So we'll get into some of the specifics as we review the tools that have been newly updated about 3-4 weeks ago. We know too that the Long-Term Care Homes Act speaks a considerable amount about quality improvement. This slide here again takes language directly out of our Long-Term Care Homes Act, and it says there that every licensee, so every administrator of a long-term care home shall develop and implement a quality improvement and utilization review system that monitors, analyzes, evaluates, and improves the quality of accommodation, care, services, programs, goods, all of those aspects provided to residents of the long-term care home. The regulation that corresponds to that talks about all of those results must be communicated to the Residents' Council when? On an ongoing basis. So again, we infer from this language that's used in the Long-Term Care Homes Act that the relationship between the administrator and the Residents' Council is very active. It's an ongoing, reciprocal relationship, lots and lots of dialogue back and forth on an ongoing basis. So with that set as our framework, I'll introduce you, if you're not aware, I'll remind those of you who are aware of the tools that OARC has in place to support your residents' councils. All of these tools have been developed with residents. So that's important for us to know, or to let you know, that every single tool that OARC produces in an effort to enhance your ability to have an effective council, all of our tools have been worked on and tested with residents. So the first picture, if you will, the first image on the left-hand side is the resource guide. Every single long-term care home in Ontario should have this resource guide. It was developed over the course of 10 months a couple of years ago with residents' council assistants, resident leaders, administrators. We had a whole advisory team that worked every single month for over 10 months producing this guide for you. So it's not a blue sky and if everything's perfect book that you can refer to. It is based in reality. So if you don't have one at your fingertips, if you're in need of another one, please give us a call or email us here at the office, and we will be more than pleased to ensure that you have what you need in terms of resource guides in your home. The next piece to the right of that is called Understanding Our Law. And that is part of what you were, or hopefully you have before you right now. It's a resource that was created when we had the Long-Term Care Homes Act in front of us. We realized that, yes, there's a section in the Act that talks about Residents' Council and powers of a Residents' Council. But lo and behold, there was a lot of other language in the Long-Term Care Homes Act that applied to Residents' Council, residents' rights, various topics around how to manage complaint streams and so on and so on. So we pulled all of the language from the regulations and the Act together and put them in one document. And that's what that document is. So within that document, you'll see the legislation in black and the layman's interpretation or the descriptive language in blue that helps us to understand what the intent is. The next image to the right shows the agenda, the provisional agenda and minute template. Again, we'll dig into that in just a couple of minutes. We have suggested opening and closing guidelines that really do set the tone for your meetings. Those can be found on our website and also in the resource guide. And then we have a newsletter called Seasons that we put together with your help, with residents, with staff, with various partners and folks that we work with throughout the year. That is a real collaborative effort to have a learning tool that is sent to our member homes. We also have another document called OARC in Action, which is a supplemental piece that we put out in between seasons when the need arises. So I wanted to explain the principles that guide the recommendations and the tool development that OARC considers. OARC met a short time ago with our Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, and we received some clarification that has informed some updates to the tools. And that really was the catalyst to us having this thorough discussion about updating the tools that we have. So OARC works with the mandate to provide support and education in the effectiveness of residence councils. And a large part of that is, as I've said, the meeting itself. Part of that involves following proper process for a meeting, for a deliberative assembly, following parliamentary procedures. That's where we draw on what's called the Roberts Rules of Order. So Roberts Rules of Order advises us on proper parliamentary procedures. The other part that we consult with in the development of our tools is the Long-Term Care Homes Act and being able to provide clarity in terms of what's required there, to explain fully the scope of influence that residence councils have within your home. Those two aspects need to come together in the tools that we develop, and they also inform our recommendations. So let's talk about the approval of minutes. And now we're getting into our recommendation, OARC's recommendation. So that slide there that you're seeing now says that if the assembly, meaning your council, if your residence council isn't meeting again for a long time, the process of approving the minutes is delegated to a special committee or an executive board. This practice produces an approved and legal record of the meeting shortly after the meeting closes, but before memories of what occurred in the meeting fade. Now that's important, particularly in the long-term care community, where many residents who live in long-term care are living with a cognitive situation, dementia, etc. So this is an important basis for OARC's recommendation and process in terms of approving minutes. So this has informed a couple of updates to our tools. There are a number of ways that the residence council may decide to inform the administrator of the home of any concerns or recommendations. Minutes, in our opinion, make the best sense, because minutes, when they're done well, they capture the flow of the meeting, and they are the documents that the Ministry of Health inspectors view to ensure that issues are being resolved. By using the minutes, all the information is kept in one place and can be easily compared month to month to month to follow the process of resolution for any identified concerns or recommendations. The other piece to consider here is the administrator acknowledgement, and we'll talk about that when we go through the minute template itself. So here's our recommendation, and it's a two-part recommendation. We recommend that the minutes, the document of minutes, be used as the tool by which the administrator is made aware of concerns and recommendations. Now, the Long-Term Care Homes Act states that if the Residence Council has advised the licensee of concerns or recommendations, the licensee shall, within 10 days of receiving the advice, respond to the Residence Council in writing. There are a number of ways that a Residence Council may decide to inform the administrator of concerns or recommendations. And the Act is not prescriptive. So again, in our opinion at OARC, we believe that the minute document is the best tool by which the administrator is made aware of concerns and recommendations. The second bit to our recommendation is that Residence Council subcommittee be established to approve minutes within 2 or 3 days of the meeting. The reasoning behind that is, again, to align with the Roberts Rules recommendation that the minutes be approved very soon after the close of a meeting before memory fades, if the council is not meeting for a very long time in between meetings. It's very difficult to approve minutes 30, 60 days after the original meeting. The other bit is in order for the administrator to respond in writing within 10 days of being made aware of issues and concerns and recommendations, we really wanted to provide a process that, that captures the true concerns and recommendations. So we've seen that in some cases, administrators are made aware of concerns that are brought forward through Residence Council, and they've begun an action plan and they've written a response and so on, but the minutes were never approved. And so in order to provide clarity that the administrator will indeed act upon and provide a written response to a very specific concern or recommendation, that is best done through approved minutes. So here's the process of approving minutes. So this is found in your tips and hints document on page 3, I believe. So you have the meeting, then the minutes are drafted. The minutes are given to Residence Council Subcommittee for review. The Residence Council Subcommittee approves the minutes, and then the administrator is given a copy of the approved minutes. That's when the duty to respond begins, on that day. The approved minutes are posted publicly with the consent of the Residence Council. That is the process of approving minutes through marrying the Long-Term Care Homes Act with Robert's Rules, as recommended by OARC. And this is the process through which our tools have been developed. So we talk about companion documents. Understanding Our Law is that document that hopefully you have at your fingertips. It's the one that pulls all of the language from our law together in one place. We have a provisional agenda that is built upon that. We have a minute template, and we have tips and hints. So here's Understanding Our Law. This is a page from that, and you can see here that, as I mentioned before, that the actual legislation verbatim is in black, and then under that you see blue wording. That is the paraphrased or lay language form of that communication. On the right-hand side, there's a column that says OARC Minute Template. The numbers contained within that column on the right-hand side correspond directly to our provisional agenda and minute template numbers. So you can see where the legislation is that supports the reason why Residence Council is talking about any number of these subtopics on the provisional agenda. So please take your provisional agenda, pull it aside, and have a look at that. This is a provisional agenda. It looks unlike a typical business agenda. It contains pieces that form what we call the core of a regular Residence Council meeting, and then it continues on to show other pieces that are addressed quarterly, sporadically, and annually. They appear on this document as a constant reminder to residents, staff, family, anyone at all who sees this agenda that there's a great scope of influence available to the Residence Council in the long-term care home. So as we go through the minute template, we will talk very briefly about each of these aspects, but just know that they're in the provisional agenda because if you are working and living in a long-term care home, the Long-Term Care Homes Act requires that Residence Council be aware of and exercise the scope of an influence in your home. So that's what the provisional agenda looks like. Only sections 1 and 2 form the regular monthly Residence Council meeting. Sections 3 all the way down to section 7, they are talked about when and if it's time to have that discussion. And again, we'll clarify that right now. So here we have what we call an example of the adjusted provisional agenda. So we're looking at sections 5 and section 6. So sections 5 and section 6 capture negotiated times that the administrator will come to the meeting or has been invited to the meeting. So section 5 talks about the requirement in our act that says that the administrator shall consult with the residence council when invited, but at a minimum once every 3 months. So that's why that is called a quarterly residence council agenda items discussion. So what we're suggesting here are that the dates that you see in the bracketed, in the brackets following each of these subheadings, these are suggestions only, just to give you an example of what the adjusted provisional agenda might look like in your home. But really what we're suggesting is that if you use this provisional agenda, you sit down with your administrator and you talk about when during the calendar year would make the most sense to have these discussions happen in your residence council meeting. So as an example, let's look at 6.3, Resident Satisfaction Survey. It's up on the screen there. The Long-Term Care Homes Act says that the licensee shall seek the advice of the residence council and family council, if any, in developing, carrying out the survey, and in acting on its results. So this is very specific to that annual resident satisfaction survey that happens in your home every single year. The reason there are 3 months beside this piece in your agenda is because the Act talks very specifically about 3 points in time through which the residence council is consulted. So first, in developing the satisfaction survey, so looking into having input in the questions. So the residence council views last year's survey and has a discussion and perhaps makes some suggestions as to new questions or edited questions that would capture what residents feel are important in terms of measuring satisfaction. Then the second part is carrying out the survey. Residence council provides advice on how the survey is executed in the home. And then the last part is acting on its results, which involves the residence council giving advice on the results that have indicated various levels of satisfaction. So this whole process takes time and is spread out across a few months. So that's why you see there May, July, September. And again, I just pulled those months as an example. It may not make sense for your home. Just have a discussion as a team in your home and decide which months make the best sense for your situation. And as another example, I'll mention 6.6, Residence Council Assistant. The Long-Term Care Homes Act states that the licensee of a long-term care home shall appoint a residence council assistant who is acceptable to the council. So OARC recommends that on an annual basis, the residence council discusses the fit of the assistant and documents in the minutes that that person has been accepted or is acceptable by the residence council. So that's an example of what we call an adjusted provisional agenda. And I suggest that the months that appear in the brackets stay on the provisional agenda as a cue and as a reminder to staff and family and residents, anybody who again looks at this agenda, it reminds people of the scope of influence that a council has within the home, and it lets everybody know when to anticipate these topics in the meeting. What part of the year these topics will be addressed. The next bit that we're going to talk about is the actual minute template that OARC created a couple of years ago, piloted this in a number of long-term care homes, residence councils, made edit after edit, and finally landed on a minute template, and this has just been revised within the last month. So this is the tool that was designed to capture the essential components of the meeting. the intent of the discussions that took place, the specifics of the recommendations or concerns brought forward to the administrator. The minute template, I'll just go back for a moment. The minute template is available in two versions. One is a Word version. That is the one that the assistant or resident would use following a meeting to actually record the minutes of the meeting. So all of these rectangles that you see expand and contract depending on how much text you need to add in. If you don't want to add in any text, if it's not spoken of in the meeting, then just leave it blank, and you can actually shrink these boxes down so that the document isn't as long as it would be if you left them intact. The other version is what we call a PDF version. This is all of our tools are available on our website, and this one is kind of neat because it's exactly as the Word version of the minute template. But you'll see on the left-hand side that there are what we call yellow conversational bubbles. So if you have this up on your computer screen and you use your cursor and hover over each yellow conversational bubble, the legislation will pop right up. So if you're ever wondering, or somebody's wondering, hey, why is the Residents' Council even talking about this topic? Just hover over that title and the legislation will pop right up. And that's an example there where you see Jen's name. Jen works here at OARC. She created this document. She helped to create this. So there you see attendance at meetings, which has to do with that specific line of the minute template. So you can have some fun with that. I know of several long-term care homes who use this to spur on whole home education. So everybody in the home learns about the entire scope of influence that the Residents' Council has within your home. It's important to talk about the function of Residents' Council meeting. Minutes. What are they all about? In many Residents' Council meeting, it is the assistant who records the minutes. It's a very, very important role. Here are some things to consider. The Residents' Council meetings are meetings for residents, and only residents are members of their meetings. So residents get to decide what's recorded in the minutes. Therefore, the minutes may not be a chronological account of everything that's spoken at a meeting. I'll just state that again. Residents decide what's recorded in the minutes. The Act says that the assistant needs to keep confidentiality. That's a really important aspect of your role, assistants who are on the webinar today. The assistant I don't want to ever underestimate the role that the assistant plays in supporting the role of Residents' Council. The minutes are approved prior to posting by Residents' Council. And I'll show where that is supported on our template in just a sec. The assistant is not a representative of the licensee. So that's relevant in terms of that whole aspect of the duty to respond within 10 days. So again, the assistant who's in the meeting, recording the minutes, that person is not a representative of the licensee. So the 10 calendar days begin when the approved minutes are brought to the attention of the administrator and acknowledged. The Act says that the 10 days begin when the administrator is made aware of the recommendations. And again, our recommendation for the process through which that happens is through the approved set of minutes. Here's the minute template, tips and hints. This is a document that was created coming out of the piloting of our tools. Any of the questions that came out from the homes that participated in creating these, we put them all together, created this document, and it really does lead you through some suggestions and the rationale for how to address each of the aspects of the minute template. So I'd encourage you, please take some time to sit together in your home, in your teams of administrator, resident, and resident leader and assistant. Take some time with the provisional agenda and the minute template tips and hints side by side. Read through the tips and hints and reference the points on the other documents as you go. This is, again, an intimate part of what we call the companion set, the companion document. And you'll see in this document, the tips and hints, that the OARC recommendation of creating a subcommittee is captured on page 3. So let's turn our attention to the minute template and take a peek at each page of the document. And I'll just remind you, please, if you do have any questions, please utilize the chat feature of your software, and I'll do my very best to answer your questions. So here we go. This is page 1 of our minute template. And you can see here that it's just, very basic information in terms of who's at the meeting, any approved guests who are present at the meeting, who the assistant is. Then we go on to page 2, where we have a call to order. The meeting comes together. We suggest that opening guidelines be read that set the tone for the discussion, lays everything out in terms of speaking respectfully and courteously with one another, that disagreements are welcomed, but it's all about being transparent and open and creating an atmosphere of support, resident to resident. So we have review and adoption of agenda. Number 1.1 says review of previously approved minutes. That is an update, because again, the minutes have been approved by the subcommittee 2 or 3 days following the meeting. So at this point in the next meeting, you're not approving the minutes, you're reviewing the highlights of the minutes that were already approved. I'm not going to highlight every single aspect of this. I really do want to encourage you to sit down with your tips and hints document as a team and investigate what this captures. This is a really important part of the minute template, number 2.1, concern, response, review. This is where we track, or you will be tracking, month to month to month, whether there's resolution of identified concerns that have been brought forward to the administrator. And I'll speak to that very specifically after we go through each page of the template. 2.2, Residents' Bill of Rights. We suggest that the Residents' Council choose 2 or 3 residents' rights to discuss every single meeting, and that a dialogue, a conversation happen, a discussion happen about that resident's right so that it's meaningful. We've made reference to the Clio book. If you're wondering what that is, again, have a look on our website. There's a document called Clio, and it's a little booklet that is very helpful in leading some discussion around Residents' Bill of Rights. Then we have page 4, which captures the Treasurer's Report, opening monthly balance, any expenses, any discussion that happens in terms of where the financial state of the Residents' Council is sitting. Then we have 2.4, any committees that residents are a part of, whether they're subcommittees of a Residents' Council, or if residents sit on home committees. Any committee whatsoever that a resident is involved in, there's an opportunity to have someone give a report, or a spokesperson give a report to the full Residents' Council at a meeting. That's what that is all about. Number 2.5 is where during your meeting you will pause and you will go through each program area in your home to identify any recommendations, concerns, or celebratory comments that you wish to note in the minutes. And this is important because it's a reminder to all of us that, yes, it's an opportunity to identify concerns or complaints, if you will, but it's also an excellent opportunity to formally recognize what's working really, really well and what you're proud of. And if you want to give compliments to various program areas, this is a great place to do it. Again, we'll talk about that in just a sec in more specific. Community involvement. If residents are involved in communities or in programs or activities outside of your long-term care home, this section is designed to capture that. So maybe there's some involvement with town hall, or maybe a resident participated in a local fundraising activity outside of your home to benefit your larger community that you're living in. This is an opportunity to be able to report back to the whole group concerning those types of activities. Number 4.0 captures any discussion that happens around the inspection reports. So anytime an inspector comes into your home, a report is generated and a copy of that is sent to the president of the residence council, the president of the family council, and the administrator of the home. And part of the scope of influence that the residence council has is to have discussions to discuss concerns, reactions, any issues around the inspection report that they've received. Then we get into section 5, which talks about the quarterly topics through the administrator being invited to attend a residence council meeting every quarter. Quality improvement. Section 6 captures the annual topics. So again, these are not talked about every single meeting. They are talked about once a year or more frequently if identified as a need by the residence council. So the home's financial statement, the detailed allocation of funding report. These are all reports that residence council has the authority to review and provide recommendations back to your home. Resident satisfaction survey, we've talked about that. Resident information package. This is an invitation for the residence council to be involved in creating a piece of information that new residents receive when they move into your home. It's separate from what the home is required to provide. So anything that you as a council may wish new residents to learn about, to motivate them to perhaps become involved in the residence council, that's what this captures. Number 6.5 talks about residence council reviewing the menu planning and the meal and snack times. Again, these are all found within the legislated powers and responsibilities of a residence council. 6.6, again, reviews the acceptance of the assistant on an annual basis. The home's mission statement is 6.7. This is the last page of the minute template. Section 7 captures the date and the time of the next meeting, the upcoming meeting. Number 8 captures some elements that are related to adjourning the meeting. So what time is the meeting adjourned? Who is it adjourned by? Closing remarks, if you choose to have closing remarks read. Who did that? Minutes approved by. So this is an update here. Residence Council Subcommittee. Who on the Residence Council Subcommittee is signing to indicate approval of the minutes? And again, this is done within 2 or 3 days of the meeting. Underneath that, we have Residence Council has given consent to post minutes. Again, this is captured in our legislation, that the minutes are posted in the home with the consent of Residence Council. The last piece on here is administrator acknowledgement. Just want to be very clear here that the administrator in signing this box is not approving the minutes. The administrator is acknowledging that he or she has been made aware of the recommendations or concerns brought forward by Residence Council, but he or she is not accepting or authorizing or approving, the minutes. So it purely is a demonstration that the administrator has been made aware of the concerns and recommendations, signature there, and date. So as soon as that's dated, that is evidence that the administrator is now aware of the concerns and recommendations brought forward, and the 10 days of accountability starts. So we have a discussion that happens in the meeting, 2.5, that's where it's captured. Then we go around to the right, the administrator becomes aware and acknowledges the approved minutes. Then we have a written response from the administrator received by Residence Council within 10 days. And then we have a discussion and Residence Council approves that at the next meeting. So let's say we had a meeting today. Residence Council has a meeting today, March 31st, 2016. So here we're getting very specific in terms of what we call the accountability loop that is supported through the use of the minute template. So in section 2.5, this is where in the meeting you pause and you talk about recommendations, concerns, or celebrations to mention. So let's say here you get down to this section, administration, and the assistant to council or the resident leader says, does anyone have anything you'd like to share about the administration or administrator of our home? And so there's a discussion, and residents would like recorded in the minutes that residents appreciate seeing the administrator out and about during the day, speaking with residents and family members. Well, that's a celebratory comment. That is a compliment that is being extended officially, if you will, from the Residence Council to the administrator of the home. Then we get to environmental services. So we've talked about religious, spiritual care. There's nothing really to note there. Then we say, does anyone have anything you'd like to share about environmental services? And someone a resident in the meeting identifies that there's drafty windows in the south dining room, and there's a discussion about that, and Residence Council decides, yep, we'd like to bring that forward as a concern through Residence Council, so it's recorded in the minutes. Drafty windows are identified in the south dining room. So that's today's meeting. So the meeting happens today. Within 2 or 3 days, the minutes are approved by the subcommittee and given to the administrator who signs that he or she is made aware of this concern. Drafty windows identified in the south dining room. Then a written response happens within 10 days. Then at the next meeting, this is what happens. So this is why we say meeting number 2. So this is next month. April 30th, 2016, we have our next Residence Council meeting. Here you have, this is how this section, section 2.1, relates to this last section that we recorded today in this meeting that we had today. So next month we get together and Residence Council has a meeting. Here we have the issue or concern. Drafty windows were identified in the south dining room. Written response received. It's a simple yes or no. When did what was the date on that written response? So if the meeting happened on March 31st and the minutes were approved within 2 or 3 days, the administrator is made aware, administrator writes a response, and it's dated April 5th. Again, these are all just examples. Action taken as per written response. So within that written response, the administrator has said, yeah, we're gonna fix that issue and we're gonna have the windows caulked on April 5th. So caulking of windows to be done by April 5th. So then there's a discussion in the meeting. Council approval of action, yes or no. And the last column captures whether or not there's resolution. And in this situation, hypothetically, yes. The drafty windows that issue has been resolved. So this shows again, the accountability loop month to month to month, where you list the issues that were identified last month, when the written response was received, what was the summary of the written response, Did council approve of that? And is there resolution? So we just want to encourage you, give it a try. Maybe you'd like to try one little element of the new tool or the updated tools. We would certainly recommend that the tools stay intact and that you just give it a try. We've piloted these, we've tested them. We have many, many, many success stories where once they have been understood and utilized and used, we've had residence councils have had tremendous success. And I also want to mention to you that our Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care inspectors are aware of these tools and they support the use of the tools. Now, the tools themselves are not mandated. You do not have to use OARC's tools. But everything that is, or the legislative components that are captured in the tools, that is mandated. That is required. So what we've done in an effort to bring everything together in one place, one time, is to create tools that are comprehensive. And the tools capture everything that you are required to provide opportunities for discussion in a residence council meeting. So we encourage you to give it a try, to contact OARC if you get stuck. If you have any questions, our information is there on your screen. We have Susan Thibert, who's our Education and Home Support Coordinator, and myself, Dee Linder, Executive Director. We have Julie Garvey in the office and Jennifer Langston. We would be so pleased to receive any questions or concerns or successes. We'd love to hear from you. So I'm just going to have a quick look here at the chat line, the chat group here, to see if there are any questions. So there's a question here that says, if you don't have anything to add, you just leave it blank. So yes, that's exactly right. If you get to a certain part in your meeting and there's no discussion about that and there's really nothing to comment, or residents decide that that they don't want to have anything captured in the minutes about that topic, you just leave it blank and you can minimize that rectangle as small as it can go and move on to the next piece. So you will not have so every time you use your minute template, you will have blank spots. And that is perfectly fine, because again, a lot of the topics that are captured on there are not spoken about or spoken to or addressed every single meeting, but they're there as a constant reminder to everybody. There's so many people who come and go in long-term care in our communities, whether it's staff, residents, family. It's really a way of being consistent in the ability to teach everybody what the Residence Council is really able to touch and influence in the home. So we do have about 5 minutes left in our webinar time together today. If you have any further questions, please have a look, or please type them in your chat box. And I'm just reading here. If they diarize within the minutes for each home area for the quarterly or annual comments to match the provisional agenda, it helps a lot when following up. So I'm going to mention that this is from Sharon Cook, who's president of OARC. Sharon has been using the minute template provisional agenda for many, many, many months. And Sharon is providing some assistance here through your words. You're saying, if you diarize within the minutes for each home area for the quarterly or annual comments to match the provisional agenda, it helps a lot when following up. Oops. There we go. So that's a bit of advice.
Can the assistant be a staff?
Can the assistant be a staff member? Absolutely. The assistant, in most cases, the assistant to residence council is indeed a staff member from the recreation or therapeutic recreation department, or a social worker. The assistant is appointed by the licensee. So the administrator, one of the roles of the administrator in terms of supporting the residence council by law is to appoint an assistant. And that assistant is to be acceptable. So if that person is not acceptable for whatever reason and the issue that's been identified can't be solved, then residence council is perfectly able to request another assistant that, again, is appointed by the administrator and found to be acceptable by the council. Okay, so I'm just going to click down to see if there's anything else. Okay, so here's a comment here from Sue. She says, we utilized the agenda and minute template and implemented these a few years ago. It really allows to be clear and concise with the meeting. We really like the welcome and closing remarks that residents share prior to and following the meetings. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Sue, for that comment. Sue Kaysen. Okay, we are at 3 o'clock now. That brings us to the end of our webinar. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you have any questions that you have once you think about what you've learned or what you've seen again today, please don't hesitate. Give us a call, send us off an email, and we'll do our very best to support you as you try something new, learn with one another, and by all means, please bring this to your residence council team so that everybody becomes aware of what's available. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.